And because of grant funding and programmatically how things operate, as you said, some things were sort of moved around to sort of retain some of those public health functions. And that would be my recollection, is that there really is more flexibility because of how the missions of those various divisions.
There certainly is more flexibility in public health. The health realignment dollars could be used across public health programs. Social services is quite regimented, and the dollars are really attached to the mandates. So thank you for pointing that out, Supervisor Smith.
And additionally, in terms of the teleconferencing that you happen to reference, the Sheriff's Department already has the ability to do that from Willits to Fort Bragg to Ukiah. So perhaps there's some way on maybe a limited basis or on a pilot project basis that some of that could be explored, because that technology really already is in the hands of the county. So maybe there's some way we can do that. Could you comment on two things? One would be, this is only in very, very general terms, and we all understand that there's a meet and confer process going on. But with respect to the possible layoffs that you referenced in one of your points here, which is, I believe, 20 slots, could you talk a little bit about how you perceive that would occur? I think there's a growing concern in the community and amongst the labor force, and I think concerns at the board level as well, that we don't want to adversely affect line workers, so and programs and service delivery to the public. So if you could comment a little bit on philosophically how you're going to approach that very difficult issue. And additionally, this potential loss of 13 additional staff, potentially, you've put that information out before us. How do you perceive that would occur if it needs to occur, and would that be part of all three of your divisions, or again, would that be the impacts just be social services, or are we looking at a broader picture? And if so, if you could give us some parameters on that.
Okay. The first one regarding the layoffs. Right now, what we're looking at is classifications. We're looking at classifications in social services, and we're looking at a vertical approach. Philosophically, we want to do the least harm that we can. And so the staff that is case carrying, the frontline staff, those that are dealing with the community, those positions we'd like to maintain as best we can. When we talk about a vertical approach with the layoffs, we're talking about looking at managers, supervisors, programmatic staff, and administrative staff. We're not talking about laying off 20 frontline case-carrying social workers. We're talking about being very thoughtful in this approach, which we've been over the past couple weeks in looking at these positions. So again, our goal is to reduce the negative impact as best we can to the community with the 20 positions, and I assure you that we are looking at managerial, supervisorial, programmatic, and administrative positions. And where those positions, as we look at classifications and programs, where the least harm can be done, the least reduction in services as we move forward. Your second question about the 13 staff. This is truly hypothetical. But when I talked with you last Tuesday about our anticipated revenue shortfall in the agency, on that day, I did not know that we were looking at an anticipated $2 million general fund deficit. So initially, we're talking about social services staff because that's the funding that's affected, and we're talking about mental health staff because that's the funding that affected. I said to this board last Tuesday that public health was solid and would not be affected. If you look at the 6% general fund dollars in the agency, some of those general fund dollars are in public health. Specifically, $600,000 of general fund dollars is in alcohol and drug services. If the county has to make up the deficit of general funds, and AOD is part of that, then alcohol and drug services would be affected. At this point in time, I don't know if we would be looking at mandatory time off for alcohol and drug services. I don't know if we would be looking at layoffs. Additionally, there is general fund dollars in social services. Those general fund dollars are used for maintenance of effort. And actually, there's some general fund dollars in CCS as well. And of course, animal control, I can't forget animal control, I think is pretty much almost all general fund dollars. So the information that I shared with this board last week is different than the information I am bringing to you today. I am saying that all of this information that I gave you up till one of the last slides about general funds, everything, all the options, the revenue streams, that is all the agency's $2 million deficit, which is the state funding and the $500,000 audit. If the agency participates in a reduction of general funds, then we are talking more of a challenge going forward, and either additional positions being laid off or additional mandatory time off for agency staff. And it will be specific to public health and to additional social services programs. Does that answer your question, Supervisor Smith?
It does, and I appreciate your candor and your ability to bring difficult information to us in a very concise and I think easily accessible manner. So thank you.
Supervisor Brown?
Yes, I wanted to ask on the alcohol and drug services, do we have an advisory committee that is helping with this process and making recommendations?
We have an advisory committee in alcohol and drug services. I do not believe that they are apprised of this issue today, since we have just learned of the issue with the general fund dollars. Certainly they can be. Now, we do have a Public Health Advisory Board, which, by the way, is transitioning into an all-agency advisory board. And we met on Friday at a retreat, and we had a member of the Alcohol and Drug Services Advisory Board there. So they did learn of this information, but we have not done a public presentation to the AOD Advisory Board on this issue as of today.
Is there any members of the public want to comment on this before we go on? Okay. Any other questions, board members? I got a couple comments. In your presentation, I think it's important to bring out the fact that through, that was the big decision this board made just 2 years ago, was to create the HHSA agency. And it's noted since its inception, we've basically generated over $2 million in revenue from, in other words, draw down federal and state funds. That's a significant amount of money so I don't think anybody can say that creating the agency was probably a bad idea to bring in that kind of money for services in this county. So, and I appreciate the efforts of that, Carmel. And this presentation here I really want to compliment on its, I mean, everybody can understand it. It's pretty black and white. I think every member of the audience out there has a clear picture of where the agency is at and is going. On the agenda summary, it says we're supposed to authorize and accept. I got a question. I guess pretty much with authorization of this, that gives the green light for Carmel to proceed in what was proposed here in this. Is that clear to all the board members? I guess, but no. Sure. Step up to the podium, please. State your name.
My name's Linda McClure, and I'm here representing Service Employees Union. First of all, I really want to acknowledge and thank all of you that have been working on this. This is horrendous times, and I know HHSA and their staff have done tremendous work. The foresight and the proactive measures they've taken, they're to be commended. And the board, you're facing some really tough decisions. We're in hard times, all of us in the county.